Evan Longoria and Lamont Wade Jr. are going to start the season on the injured list. We learned today that Evan Longoria is going to miss 6 weeks. We don't yet know how long Lamont Wade Jr. is going to be out. So what are the Giants going to do? What did they do last year when Longoria missed almost, or actually more than 2 months? And actually the answer might surprise you. So all of that is next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, we're just going to continue analyzing the loss of Evan Longoria and Lamont Wade Jr. to injuries here in spring training with the regular season just over a week away. So they're big blows, but at the same time, the Giants, the way that they've built their roster, they don't really it's not like a stars and scrubs kind of roster where, you know, like when the Giants had Barry Bonds in some of those mid-2000s years, if he wasn't in the lineup, it was like you might as well go home when you showed up to the ballpark. They were just not going to be a competitive offensive team. But the philosophy behind this team is layers and layers of depth. And that's why I wanted to look back at what the Giants did last year in Evan Longoria's absence, because my first speculation was that losing Longoria meant Wilmer Flores would kind of be the primary third baseman moving forward while Longoria is out. And then Gabe Kapler said that. So, okay, verification. And then looking back to last year, Longoria missed more than 2 months with the shoulder injury he sustained when he collided with Brandon Crawford on a defensive play. And I wanted to see, okay, what did they do and how did they perform as a team? Well, they went 38-20 in his absence, which spanned from June until, was it June? It was 2 months. I don't know the exact dates, but it was more than a 2-month absence. He sustained the injury in June and came back in August. And they went 38-20, and Wilmer Flores made the vast majority of starts at third base during that span. They also had some starts by Chris Bryant, but that was towards the end. Longoria came back in kind of mid to early August, and Bryant was acquired and debuted in early August. Jason Vossler also made some starts, but it was mostly Wilmer Flores' job. And during that stretch, Flores had a 121 weighted runs created plus. So honestly, I mean, that's beyond kind of the production I would expect from Longoria. So it's arguable that you're actually upgrading offensively, and the real issue would be defensively. But we have this defensive kind of data, outs above average, defensive runs saved, and I would argue that it was actually not nearly as much of an issue as we kind of painted out to be. I think that Flores had big-time issues defensively at third base in 2020, but that wasn't so much the case in 2021. So look, I'm not trying to come on here and paint this as a big rosy picture, but I'm just pointing out simply that it did not derail them, and people thought that it would, but they had almost twice as many wins as losses during that stretch without Longoria. So it is possible that it's not as big of a deal as it might seem. Now moving on to Lamont Wade Jr., again, he's like a role player. He's a platoon player. He was going to start against right-handed pitching. Often when a lefty would come in out of the bullpen, he would be out, and they would substitute someone in, whether it's Austin Slater or Tyro Estrada or Darren Ruff or Wilmer Flores, whatever the case may be, and then change the defense accordingly depending on who you bring in. So again, I'm not trying to minimize the loss of a player who figured to play a significant role for this team, but the idea with this team is that they have layers and layers of depth. And so, as we discussed yesterday, what the Wade Jr. injury seems to do is that it brings Duggar back up from the minor leagues. And I think a lot of people have been wanting Steven Duggar to get more of an opportunity. Well, this is why you have the depth, because somebody goes down and then somebody who's deserving of more chances gets that call. And for me, it's going to be Steven Duggar who comes up, and then suddenly your outfield against right-handed pitching is Jock Peterson maybe in left, and Duggar in center, and Mike Yastrzemski in right. And then against left-handed pitching, you're able to go with Austin Slater in that outfield, as well as Darren Ruff probably shifts to the outfield against lefties. So you've got Ruff in left, you've got Slater in center. And to me, you've still got, this was an issue before Wade, because Wade wasn't going to start against left-handed pitching, but to me, there's still maybe a right-handed platoon bat in the outfield away from being complete, and maybe the loss of Wade allows them to add another player to the roster. It could be Luke Williams, who was just acquired in a trade. I'm not exactly sure what his primary position is. He played every position for the Phillies last year except pitcher and catcher, and they just acquired him in this minor kind of trade, and he's on the 40-man roster. So he could definitely be a guy who we see as the result of these injuries, especially because he can play third, he can play the outfield, they can kind of move him around. And so somebody goes down, and it just gives somebody else who they think is deserving of chances that chance. That being said, I think they're like in borderline territory of having issues, and it's not necessarily going to work out. And it all worked out really well last year. I've made this a point, though. It wasn't that every single thing went right last year. A lot did not go right. They had a lot of injuries. Longoria and Belt and Mike Yastrzemski didn't play well. Tommy La Stella was injured and not very productive. So last year was not like a fairy tale. Every single thing went right. And so I wouldn't hit the panic button at this point in time. But for me, if you're already talking about Luke Williams having a significant role, and Wilmer Flores is your starting third baseman, and behind him is maybe Jason Vossler, you're like an injury or two away from, for me, having an issue and like needing to make some kind of addition from outside your organization. So coming up next, is there an intriguing player who might actually solve a lot of problems all at once, and maybe the fit makes sense for both sides, both teams potentially in a trade? So we'll get into that and much more in just a minute. But first, our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because honestly, I wanted to see what all the hype was about. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. It's lifestyle friendly whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. And it costs less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than that cold brew habit, certainly by a lot. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into cold and flu season. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No more need for a million different pills that can be hard to swallow and inconvenient, and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB-network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/MLB-network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, as promised, I want to throw out a little idea that wasn't my own, admittedly. I'm in this like Slack channel for fantasy baseball, and some people were throwing out this idea, and it actually really intrigued me. And the idea would be a trade with the Tampa Bay Rays. Okay, we're speculating here. There's really nothing to this. There haven't been any rumors. But the Rays, they actually just optioned this player today. Vidal Bruján is a top 100 prospect. He's MLB ready, but he doesn't have a spot on the Tampa Bay Rays major league roster. he's valuable depth to them. I'm not saying he's useless to them, but he's a dynamic athlete, impact runner, switch hitter, makes a lot of contact, very young. I mean, I think he's in his early 20s. He's 24. He stole 45 bases between AAA and the major leagues last year with, in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, was only caught 8 times. So very good success rate, makes a lot of contact. We're not sure if the bat is going to be an impact bat, and maybe there's not enough power there to be an impact bat, but he's going to impact the game with his legs as a base runner. He's a good defender, and he moves around. He can play, I think his primary position is second base, but the Rays have also moved him around to positions such as third base and the outfield. So to me, does that sound like a perfect fit for the Giants roster or what? And as far as I know, this is his final option year. And so it's getting close to kind of do or die time for Vidal Bruján. And it makes a lot of sense that the Giants could potentially swoop in and exchange a prospect of equal value, maybe who has more options or is at another position where the Rays have more of a need, because they've got Brandon Lowe at second base. I guess if they view him as an outfielder, he probably could serve an important role for the Rays. And I am saying this without 100% being dialed in on the Tampa Bay Rays roster needs. But I know at the primary position, Brandon Lowe is going to be there for a long time. Brandon Lowe is under contract with the Rays. He's a very good second baseman. Fangraphs just put out their depth charts at the position of second base, and Brandon Lowe and company were number 1 in the sport at the position. And Lowe is under contract through 2026. So there's not really a long-term role at that position for Lowe, although Lowe also moves to the outfield, and Bruján can also move to the outfield as well. But they've got Randy Arozarena, they've got Manuel Margot, and they've got Kevin Kiermaier kind of penciled into their outfield. So, and Brett Phillips on the bench. He's a speedy defense-first outfielder himself. So I don't know about the availability of Bruján, but maybe, I don't know what the Rays' depth is at the catcher position, but maybe like a Patrick Bailey for Bruján swap. I'm completely speculating here. Another thing to keep in mind is that Kevin Kiermaier was reportedly on the trade block, and Kevin Kiermaier kind of solves an issue for the Giants as well. And if the Rays are really looking to move him, that could be an intriguing possibility. Although this close to opening day, I'm not sure they're prepared to kind of shake up their roster like this, the Rays, that is. But Kiermaier is owed $12.2 million in 2022. There's a $13 million club option for 2023 with a $2.5 million buyout. So it's essentially a $14.7 million guarantee. And I think that that's kind of an underwater deal, and that the Rays would welcome the opportunity to potentially move on from that money. And to me, they've been tied somewhat to Michael Conforto. Could it make sense to clear some money for the Tampa Bay Rays, attach Kiermaier and Bruján, which would lessen the prospect haul from the Giants, and the Rays use that money to go sign Michael Conforto? I think that could make more sense. The thing about Bruján is that he makes so much sense for the Giants, a roster that is not very young, not very athletic. And going into the offseason, Farhan Zaidi talked about getting younger and getting more athletic. And so Bruján, he would be like a key piece of the future core of this Giants team. And that's the thing about a young player. He's got, he comes with like 6 years of club control as well. The Giants don't really have that. Their one player who kind of is young and under team control for a long time is Logan Webb, young and good and under team control for a long time. So they need to start adding those types of players, and ideally it's going to come from their own minor league system eventually, but it hasn't really happened yet. So I just thought that was an interesting thought, and whether it's Bruján and Kiermaier or whatever a trade might be, that type of move is what makes more sense to me for a team in the Giants position versus going out and getting a Jose Ramirez. I think that's more of a pipe dream and not necessarily realistic. But if you look for players who are intriguing and young and up and coming and good prospects who might fit the roster, a Giants roster better than they fit the team that they're on's roster, that's what to look out for. And there's lots of possibilities like that are out there. And so it just remains to be seen who's available and what the Giants might do. But I wouldn't put it past them to make kind of a sneaky under the radar type of acquisition like this. And we'll see. Or they could do nothing. But I just have a feeling that the roster is a work in progress. And I want to remind everyone that Farhan Zaidi continually says the opening day roster is the most overhyped roster there ever is in baseball because we don't have one for 6 months. But once opening day happens, the roster is going to change all the time. Even in 2019, Zaidi's first season, they acquired Kevin Pillar in a trade like 4 days into the season or less. And so even if nothing happens and they just roll with this roster on opening day, doesn't mean it's not going to change a lot throughout the course of a year. So coming up next, I want to look at what is the Giants' opening day roster? What does it figure to be at this point with these two significant injuries? So stay tuned for that. But first, it's that time of year. I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions usually, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a treat. They're not just a protein bar, actually. They are a treat. And they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Sounds like a treat, right? Well, go to Built.com, scroll down to the macros chart, and you'll be blown away. High protein, high fiber, low calorie, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs to go along with 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, as promised, we are going to talk about the Giants' opening day roster at this point in time. If I had to make a prediction, like what has changed, we did a prediction not long ago about what the opening day roster would be. But of course, things have changed a little bit with these injuries. So I mentioned that I thought it would bring Steven Duggar onto the roster, where previously I had him not making the roster, which is valuable depth. And it kind of stinks for Steven Duggar. And for a long time, we were assuming that Duggar did not have an option because that's what it says on his roster resource page, but apparently that's incorrect and he does have a remaining option. But I think that the Wade Jr. injury makes Duggar the direct beneficiary. And so we'll talk about what that is in a second. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So yeah, the opening day roster, for me, you just kind of swap out Lamont Wade Jr., Steven Duggar for Lamont Wade Jr., and then your outfielders on your opening day roster, which remember is going to be 28 instead of 26, which will also allow them to carry guys who are actually out of options like Mauricio Dubon and Tyler Beede, potentially. But they could always make moves here again. The Giants, just like any other team, are a team that could be looking to make moves based on having a roster crunch and guys who are out of options that might make sense on a better team or a different team. Might make more sense on a different team is what I'm trying to say. So I've got Darren Ruff listed as an outfielder. The Giants announced him as an outfielder when they announced the extension that he signed. I've got Austin Slater, Steven Duggar now, Mike Yastrzemski, and Jock Peterson. So there's a 5-man outfield where you have, again, 2 righties and 3 lefties, which is going to make one of the lefties an everyday player. And perhaps that is Mike Yastrzemski, who gets that shot initially, but he struggled so much against lefties last year. My question about that outfield is, what do you do if none of the lefties are proving to be... Certainly you're not going to give Steven Duggar or Jock Peterson at bats against left-handed starting pitchers, I wouldn't think. So that means Yastrzemski is an everyday player. He looked like it prior to 2021, so we'll see. It is a big question for me, and if they can't do it, what is the move going to be? They've got Elliot Ramos on the 40-man, and they have Jalen Davis on the 40-man, so that's potentially a move that could be made, and an intriguing one. I mean, Elliot Ramos is a top 100 prospect himself, and he's kind of ready. He's got upper minors experience. And if he does well, he could definitely slot into that platoon role to get his first crack at the major leagues. So that's 5. And then in the infield, this is where I haven't even really mentioned this enough, but Tommy La Stella and Brandon Belt are both kind of potentially question marks themselves for opening day, and they're dealing with injuries. La Stella had off-season Achilles surgery, and he hasn't even played the field, or maybe I think yesterday was his spring debut, and he was the DH. And so he's questionable for opening day. And then what would the roster look like at that point? And Brandon Belt is dealing with, I think, knee something or other. They've been basically saying they expect him to be on track and probably make that opening day team. So I haven't been too concerned, but that's also what they said about Longoria. And then we heard he needed surgery. So I'm not saying that's going to happen with Belt, but just worth watching. I'll have a more detailed update at some point, probably later this week. But La Stella and Belt on my opening day roster, but they are questions. And if they can't make it, who fills in for them? Again, if we hear anything about them not making it, we'll definitely go down that road. So, of course, Brandon Crawford is there. Wilmer Flores, Mauricio Dubon, who's out of options, so I'm keeping him by having him on this roster. And then Thairo Estrada. So for me, with Evan Longoria going down, it probably means adding one more player to the Major League roster. Luke Williams is on the 40-man now. He's the guy I was saying he played every position for the Phillies last year except pitcher and catcher. They acquired him in this minor trade a few days ago. For me, because he's on the 40-man, he might be in line to make this team. Also, there's Alex Blandino, former first-round pick of the Cincinnati Reds. The Giants signed him to a minor league deal, and he's an interesting guy. If you look at the kind of breakdown, he's a very, very patient hitter. Doesn't swing a whole lot, borders on kind of passive, and hasn't hit for nearly enough power, but also a versatile player, moves around, and a local kid, and he definitely could be in line to make this opening day roster, but he's not on the 40-man yet, so they would have to add him, and they would have to make a corresponding move, like designating someone for assignment. So those are my position players. I guess I'm adding Williams, but it could be Blandino, but they'd have to make that corresponding move. So I've got 6 infielders and 5 outfielders, so that's 11. And then I've got 7 infielders and 5 outfielders once we add that extra guy, whether it's Williams or Blandino at this point. And so we've got 12, and then we've got our 2 catchers, Joey Bart and Kurt Casale. So that's 14, half of our 28 allotted spots for the opening day roster. And the pitching hasn't changed. Webb, Rodon, DeSclafani, Wood, and Cobb, there's 5. And then in the bullpen, Doval, McGee, Rogers, Leone, Harleen Garcia, Zach Littell, Jose Alvarez, Tyler Beatty, and Kervin Castro. But there's a lot of ways they could go there. A lot of guys have options. They could have Jacob Junis on that in that bullpen. John Brebbia could be in that bullpen. And guys with options include Littell, Junis, Kervin Castro, and others. So I think the pitching is still in pretty good shape. And on the position player side, it's just Duggar and Luke Williams or Alex Blandino who get added in the place of these 2 injured players. So anyway, as we hear more, we will continue to provide updates as we get closer to opening day. I'm super excited. And we're going to do a mailbag later in the week as well. So look out for the prompt on Twitter. And I can't wait to get to what is sure to be some interesting questions with the Giants going through a lot right now as opening day approaches. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Also liking, commenting, and subscribing if you're on YouTube. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Stay locked on Giants.